Welcome back to Four Eyes, the podcast series that gives you a clear view into the optometry world across Canada and the US. We are your hosts. I'm Dr. Amrit Bilku.
I'm Dr. Deepan Kaur.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ravinder Randhawa.
And I'm Dr. Alex Kuhn.
Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Steve Vargo, a graduate from ICO, and after working many years in clinical optometry, he decided to pursue his passion for practice management by earning his MBA degree from the University of Phoenix in 2008. He is a published author, and so today we're going to be talking about his new published book, Prescribing Change. So hopefully all of our listeners can really enjoy the interview today. And if you're interested in the book, you can purchase it on Amazon. We'll have the link in our description box below. Dr. Vargo, we'd like you to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, just in case if they don't know who you are. So Sure. Go for it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks again for having me. So I am Steve Vargo. I went to ICO. I was drawn toward optometry because I always liked the business side of it. And of all the healthcare professions, that seemed like a good fit in terms of you could run the business side of things. And also I had an interest in the clinical side too. So that merging of those two is really interesting to me. And started to realize the more I practiced, the more interested I was more on the business side of things. And an opportunity came up about 4 or 5 years ago to join a group called Prima Eye Group at the time. And so I packed up the family and out of the Chicago area and moved to somewhere we had never been, to Atlanta, and started doing practice management consulting there full time. So I stepped away from eye care. And about a year in, we were bought by iDoc. So my world right now is more consumed with the business side of eye care and not so much the clinical side. But I enjoy it. It's rewarding in its own way. I used to be able to help people see better. And now, I get to work with a lot of private practice owners that, in all fairness, they don't really have much business training. You would know better than I would how much that's changed in school now. When I was there, we really didn't have a lot, certainly not enough to prepare you for operating a business. I think a lot of people kind of get caught there realizing they don't really have as much knowledge and skills as they need to run that. So it's really enjoyable. I enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't changed in school. There's literally
we're still not learning anything.
Yeah, I think we had one course, right? That was on business management, and I think it didn't really help that much in terms of the specific questions we needed answered. So it's crazy that schools don't incorporate this more, because I feel like optometry, a lot of it is business and so but we'll get more into that.
And I tell people too that it's a shame that there's not more, because I always felt like we were asked when we came out of school, we were kind of pointed in this direction of going into private practice, but at the same time we had very minimal training in operating a business.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's a lot of other things that need to be taught, but I do think they need to figure out a way to get more of that training in there. Because the problem comes when you do own a practice, you have to realize that you have to be mindful of the business, because it's that revenue, it's those profits. In addition to having a nice quality of life, which nobody should ever fault themselves for wanting that, but also it's that revenue and profit that gets reinvested back into the practice, right? To reinvest back into the staff and the technology and the diagnostics and everything it takes to run a successful practice, but also deliver the best possible patient care.
Yeah, but that's why we're really thankful that we have people like you who get more into the business side to help all of us who either just don't know anything about business, even if you would teach us 100 times, or if we, don't have time or money to take, business courses, even after optometry school, because who wants to go back to school again once you finished optometry school? Everyone's burned out.
I'm one of the weird ones who did that.
I
enjoyed that part of it. But most don't. And that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But get help. We do have some. I will tell you, they're the exception, or there's fewer of them, the ones who are really entrepreneurial driven. And they tend to be the ones that really, really embrace the business side of things. If you don't, it's okay. It doesn't mean you can't operate a successful business, but get help. One way or another, find people that can help you, find mentors. stay current on classes, and develop that side of it, because it's a struggle if you don't know what you're doing.
Yep. And, this is where your new book comes in very handy, aside from even all your other books that really help optometrists try to navigate their way through their business and their practices. And so we're going to talk a lot about your new book today, Prescribing Change. And so we do want to mention, even in your previous book, But I Don't Sell, it covers very similar topics that are discussed in Prescribing Change. So how would you say your new book, Prescribing Change, is different from your previous books? And what will readers learn from this particular book compared to the others that you've written?
Yeah, there's certainly some crossover and similarities between the two. With the other one, But I Don't Sell, I really tried to bridge the gap between this conflict that a lot of optometrists have between not wanting to sell or not wanting to acknowledge that they sell anything, but also the need to be able to sell. I honestly never got too caught up with the semantics of that word, but some people do. And the title of that book is a little tongue in cheek. But I wanted to give people the tools that they needed to be more effective at selling without feeling salesy, and to be able to do that. I would say the new book, Prescribing Change, I really expanded on that book into a broader format, because as we were talking before, there is a problem I see a lot in eye care, especially nowadays, where, especially with independent practices, they want to be able to kind of take their practice to that next level, develop out specialties, differentiate themselves, build a new brand. A lot of that is contingent on being able to get the patients on board, right? Let's just say you want to develop a specialty like you, Amrit, vision therapy. Well, you need the patient's buy-in for that as well. Otherwise, you're just talking a lot. You're educating, you're informing. People are sitting there, they're nodding their head, but they don't actually move forward. They don't act on the recommendations. I talk with a lot of vendors, and a lot of times the vendor, for whatever product it is, I'll ask, why does this doctor over here have a lot of success with that service, with that technology, with that product, but this doctor over here doesn't? And the majority of the time they'll say, it's the doctor. It's their approach. It's how they, it's their interaction with the patient. So I wanted to better understand and share that. So I think the person who would be a good fit for reading the book is if you did want to take your practice to the next level. And even if you're an employee, even if you don't own your own practice, just the ability to better connect with people and have more influence over patients. Because I hear all too often that we do a lot of talking to patients, but we can't get them to act on the information that we're giving them.
It happens a lot when you're educating your patients on why things are important, and you really feel like you've gotten through to them. And then at their follow-up visit, you kind of realize nothing was taken from the last conversation.
Yeah, and it's hard to change. It is hard to change. It's hard for us to change, let alone what are we trying to do? That's really why I ended up deciding on the title, Prescribing Change, because we're trying to get other people to change, but change in ways that benefit them, change in ways that benefit their vision, their health, their quality of life. And our impact as physicians really is contingent on our ability to get other people to change. Otherwise, we're just talking. You can educate all day long, but if people don't act on your recommendations, you're not really having much of an impact on your patients. We need something to change.
Yep.
So speaking of ways of getting people to change, you mentioned the best way to gain influence over people is to make a genuine human connection, right? So you go into detail by discussing the CONNECT method. Can you expand on what CONNECT stands for and how you came about creating this method?
Yeah. Well, somewhere through the book, I got the idea that this would be easier to maybe to absorb a little bit if there was some formula or something that people could really to look at and recall easily. It's really too deep of a topic to go in here, but the first chapter is, before I get into the CONNECT method, is called The Science of Decision Making. And that was really fascinating to me. That's something I really studied in terms of how do we have more influence with people and actually get them to act on information. A lot of that has to do with understanding how people make decisions. And we make decisions from certain parts of our brain that are much more tied to feelings and emotion than logic and reason. So, but as doctors, a lot of times we talk to people in a way that we're trying to connect with them and educate them, give them all the logical reasons for trying to do something. Not only does that not connect literally with the part of the brain responsible for decision making, but we actually bypass that part of the brain and talk directly to a part of the brain, that more logical side of the brain, responsible for skepticism and judgment. So think about that as we're trying to get people to do something and we're talking to their part of the brain that's responsible for skepticism and judgment. Once I understood that, it became much easier to try to come up with these other ideas and these other strategies for connecting with people in a way that made that connection, in particular with that part of the brain. So connect, I'll go through it real quickly. The C stands for curiosity. And that for me is where it all starts. Whether we're talking about selling a pair of glasses or selling somebody on vision therapy or selling somebody to be more compliant with their medication, it really starts with getting curious about the other person. If we go back to that neurological side that we're talking about, that decision-making part of the brain really only cares about us. It's very narcissistic and self-serving. There's other parts of the brain that we're all very compassionate and empathetic about a lot of things. It's just not that part of the brain. So you really have to devote more time to getting curious about the other person. I talk about in the book, stay curious longer and be slower to rush to recommendations. I think we skip that process a lot. The O is ouch, where does it hurt? And that really leans into the trying to better understand what a patient's true pain points are. I think sometimes we just find out the superficial stuff, like they're here for new glasses or they're on their last pair of contacts, and we move right on. Mm-hmm. So how do you peel back the layers to get to people's more of their pain points, especially their emotionally charged pain points? And yes, we have those even with vision. The N in Connect is no involvement, no commitment. So understanding that people nowadays, patients actually want to be involved in their care, that sometimes we take the approach of being too directive, and there's a time and a place for that for sure. But I talk about a lot of studies that shows how much more effective you are as a physician if you involve the patient. Patients want a partner in their healthcare, not just someone to tell them what to do. The next end is no time like showtime, which is really a chapter about how do we make a more persuasive presentation? How do we use things like vision and visuals and contrast and stories, again, to connect with someone, connect with that part of the brain so they understand and comprehend what we're saying. Because to your point earlier, Amrit, sometimes you talk to people, it's like they're there physically nodding their head, but research even shows in situations like that, people are so quick to forget even important medical information.
Yeah.
E is earn trust. And the book really, the whole thing is about trust. I mean, we're always trying to build trust with patients. How do you do that? And we think as physicians, as doctors, that patients naturally trust us, but a lot of times they don't. They don't. They're, for a lot of reasons, the trust in the medical community and medical professions is not what it used to be. The C is for conquer objections, because sometimes you can do all these things and people still say no.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that in a understanding, empathetic way? And then the last chapter is the T is tell me what to do, which really leans into an area that's of interest to me called motivational interviewing. And it ties in with other parts of the book that really is built around better understanding the patient's motives for wanting to change. A lot of times we give our reasons, our motivations for wanting them to change. If it doesn't connect, people are very reluctant to do it. If we can better understand their reasons for change, they're much more likely to get on board with it.
Yeah.
That's
I know you've probably said it like 100 times in the past few months promoting the book. So
I tried to make it more succinct, as you know.
Yeah.
So I did another podcast and I was halfway through that and I thought, I am talking way too much here. So I turned it up.
We definitely appreciate it. But, heading into the first chapter, so C, curiosity is caring, part of the CONNECT method. You mentioned that healthcare professionals often focus on, again, sharing the information through patient education, but it's often one-sided and doesn't involve the patient, so it doesn't involve an exchange of information. And so without giving away too much in the chapter, because we do want our listeners to buy the book and read it and learn from it, but how can we engage with our patients and actually get them to want to learn the information that we share?
Yeah. There's I'll share a quick story of something that happened to me, and I put this in the book as well. And it really had a lot to do with what inspired me to actually write this book. But there was a friend of mine who worked out at the same health club that I did. His dad was a financial advisor, and the son worked in the company as well. And he kept bugging me about going to see his father who's the financial advisor. And I already had a financial advisor, and I don't claim to be an expert on all of that, but I thought I knew enough. And I thought my financial advisor was doing a pretty good job. And we met. I finally agreed to do it. And we met at Panera Bread, and his father sat down, and basically the first 20 minutes of the meeting was just him peppering me with questions. And as the lunch went on, the questions became increasingly personal. How much money do you make? What do you do with savings? What do you do with money that's left over? What would you do if you got hurt for a period of time and couldn't work for 6 months? What if you got permanently hurt? And what would happen to your family? Would your family be taken care of? So I left this meeting with my head spinning. And I remember actually in the car on the way home thinking, wow, that was powerful, because I wanted to turn the car around. I didn't even want to go to this lunch. I didn't even want to meet with this guy. And then all of a sudden I had all these questions. This is the beauty of questions. It opens knowledge gaps. And we get that, I think, a lot in clinical care when seeing patients. You get a lot of patients who come in and think they know everything. They think they don't need you. They just need the basics. Just give me a new pair of glasses. They don't understand everything we do. But if you can ask questions that actually open up knowledge gaps with patients and get them curious, a lot of times your curiosity will lead to them getting more curious. And all of a sudden you've got an engaged audience in front of you. So I got home from that lunch meeting and I thought, how can I take that? How can we take that and apply it to a clinical setting where we can address patients, where we can communicate with patients in a way that get them more curious about what we do and what we can do for them.
So I do want to say about your book, when you're talking about human connection, there's a lot of books out there that talk about this, but don't give specific examples. And I'm not going to reveal anything about your book, but your book does a really great job of giving specific examples of how like optometrists can properly approach the patient in terms of educating them or getting them to basically take part in the recommendations that they're talking about. So I do want to say that. So that's why it's even more important for our listeners to grab your book, and because you do give those specific examples, which I
appreciate. I wanted to be actionable. I didn't want it to just be theory, but I wanted to be able to, and that was a goal going in, that somebody could actually read that and have action, be able to take things from that and act on them and apply them right away.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So skipping ahead to chapter 5, No Time Like Showtime, you highlight factors to help deliver information to patients in a more impactful way, like telling stories, demonstrating enthusiasm, and being likable. And some would argue that many of these factors can't really be taught, and it kind of depends on whether or not you have a quote personality. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something I've thought about as well. What I tried to do in that chapter was, again, how do you enhance your presentation skills in front of a patient so you make that connection? To do that, I had to better understand what are those things that connect to, again, that part of the brain responsible for decision making, responsible for people taking action. And it's very responsive to things like visuals. It's responsive to contrast, which is something we do every day, right? Contrast, which is better, one or two. Think about it for a second. When that choice is easy, people are very, it's very easy to come up with that decision. If one choice, if one is much clearer than two, it's very easy to make a decision. But as soon as those start to look alike, people get very non-committal and indecisive, right? that part of the brain really likes contrast. Things like using stories, keeping the message simple. That part of the brain can get overwhelmed really easy. To your point, things like enthusiasm and likability, some people are just wired up more that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's aspects of that you can work on. Some people just are going to be more likable, I think, than others. But if you're kind of a jerk, that's something you should probably work on, right? And I'll tell you, there's some ODs out there that are kind of jerks. Their patients don't like them. Their staff doesn't like them, just to be candid about it. And there's certainly some things that they should probably work at in terms of that. I think it can be worked on. But it's a good question because I think some of that is wired up in your DNA, but I still think many of these things are things that can be applied and worked on in most settings.
Yeah. I think I saw online you do a CEO challenge weekly, correct? Is that correct?
That
or
is
monthly?
Monthly. Either that or I'm missing a lot of deadlines. But
well, I happened to stumble upon that, and I thought it was really interesting because you challenge people that are in leadership positions monthly to work on something new every month, and whether it's on themselves or as something as part of their practice that they have to work on, or with their staff and their team members. So I actually really like that because sometimes when people are in leadership positions, if they are intimidating and they don't know it, then, no one else is really going to step up and let them know that things might need to be changed. And so your CEO challenge is something that comes up where people might read it and be like, oh, maybe this is something I should try out. And, so they really get a chance to boost their practice, boost their own personality, and get things going.
Yeah, no, thank you. And not to take a detour there, but it's something that I noticed early on. In consulting is the downside to having what I like to call a leadership void in a practice. So many of the problems I hear with the practice growing, with staff management problems, and a lot of the other issues I hear stem back to leadership. And I started to see the value of having people, which usually tends to be either the doctors or the managers, having people that are strong leaders in the practice, how much of a difference and impact that could make on the overall growth.
Yeah. So you did mention that one of the main points in your book is all about trust. So in chapter 6, called Earn Trust, it discusses 3 areas in developing trust with patients, including authority, capabilities, and results. So how do we, as new grad optometrists, develop trust with patients when we don't really have as much clinical confidence, experience, or an established reputation that other vet optometrists already have?
That's a great question. And I have to admit that when I wrote that chapter, I did have a more seasoned doctor in mind, something to work toward. When I talk about authority, and I don't know how many people actually do this, but I authority is really a lot of branding. And I always tell people, be a rock star in your area. You don't have to be a nationally renowned expert, but make an effort to build your name in your community so people think of you. Call up your local newspaper and ask if you can be interviewed. Or their local podcast, get on the radio, whatever you need to do to really build your name that way. So you have that level of authority. The capabilities was constantly developing your skills, because you can't just have the brand, but you don't deliver when people come to see you. So whatever it is, Amrit, your vision therapy, that I'd say, continue just learning as much as you can, be a sponge. I'm sure you will. Deepan, you talked about dry eye. You're not going to know everything when you first start practicing. At 20 years down the road, you're not going to know everything. But if you continue investing in that side of your practice, you don't have to be good at everything, but be great at maybe just one thing. If that's your brand, if that's what you want to do. So if you're known by name, by reputation, and you can deliver on those skills, and you can deliver results where you can say, look, it's not just my theory, but here's the results I get with my patients, and be able to communicate that is a tremendous amount of trust. And that will make a lot of difference in your ability to get people to change, which is really what we're talking about. So you're a new grad, you don't have all that. I remember when I first started practicing, a patient, she was looking at me kind of odd. She was diabetic and I'm going through my exam. And at one point she just came out and said it. She goes, "Are you old enough to be a doctor?" So I was slightly offended at the time. And now if anyone wants to accuse me of looking too young to be a doctor, then I'm okay with it. I've decided. Um, but
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend of mine who worked at a specialist office, and we were the same age right out of school. And I said, "How do you handle it? Because you're seeing all these people under him, and everybody knew the specialist in the area." And he goes, "When I walk in, they always look. If I haven't seen them before, they always look disappointed to see me. And they're like, 'Oh, I thought I was going to see Doctor So and So.'" And he goes, "I just say, 'Oh, no problem. We'll grab them in a second. Let me just sit down and see what's going on.'" And he would just chat with them, get to know their problems a little bit better. And then it gave him a chance to talk about things going on with their condition in a way that he communicated a high level of understanding. So I think if you put those two together, I think trust, again, when we feel like somebody is looking out for our best interest, there's automatically a seed of trust there. And when through the way they communicate with us, that we get a higher level of trust that they actually know what they're talking about. It's something that you always want to keep building, that trust aspect. But I also think that you're going to get that eye when you walk in the room sometimes, like, "How old are you?"
Yeah.
But
Very
I would
common,
focus on just making sure that you create that you stay curious about the other person, and just demonstrate through the words you use, through your actions, that you do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think what you said is like super important. I'm sure, Amrit, you've also got the "how old are you?" I've
All the
gotten
time.
that like at least
All
3
the time.
times already.
You hate it until it
Yeah,
stops.
it's like, I mean, yeah, but it's like, it's exactly what you were saying. It's like, oh, how do I now handle this? Or, and then you kind of just sit there and go, well, let me talk to you a little bit more and listen to
Yeah.
what's happening. But I think the other thing you mentioned too, just as new grads, just kind of building your brand when you start. And I think for us, especially for the four of us, when we graduated, we hit the ground running. Like we were like, okay, we're going to do everything in 1 year. That's it. It'll be all figured out. And I think the one thing that new grads don't realize is that it definitely takes time to kind of build that experience. And
I think we're entering a time where you don't have to be I think we're seeing more specialization where you don't necessarily have to know everything, but what is your area? People ask me sometimes, should I go into this? Should I go into vision therapy, or what specialty? And I ask a question that I think throws them off, and I'll say, what are you interested in? Because I honestly don't know that many people who have really succeeded in any specialty at a high level who wouldn't, and I say this in the most admirable way, who wouldn't bore the crap out of you at a cocktail party talking about what they do. Because they love what they do.
Yeah.
And most of the people that I see that are really successful in vision therapy and in specialty contacts, the people who speak nationally on these topics and write, most of them are very passionate about that area. So I would really lean into that and understand you don't have to be the expert at everything. But if there's an area that you really want to build out your brand in, you can definitely, it's not that hard to be the best person in your area.
Yeah. Which you also mention in the book, like in your community, you can be the best at something.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really
lot of people aren't
thing.
doing it.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that a lot of people aren't doing it. So get out there and do it.
In the book, many factors that you discuss on making connections, influencing decisions, and getting patients to change depend heavily on how clinicians are communicating with their patients. So all this kind of stuff that we already discussed, do you think it's possible to still successfully implement these strategies in those typical 15 or 10 to 15 minute exams that, you see at like Walmart and things like that?
Yeah, we have to. And that's something that I was very aware of as well when I was writing the book, is that we are not psychologists that have hour-long sessions every week with the patient. Efficiency is very important. So I think we have to rethink in some ways how we allocate our time, because you might only have 15, 20 minutes in an exam room with the patient. How do you use that time? And there's a lot of doctors out there who take a very mechanical approach. They like to do a lot of the tests, and they get caught up in the EHR and typing. I think we really need to stand back and say, is that the best use of our time? I talk about a way in the book that's talk about these 3 layers. You could approach it in a way of, I would tell you to stop asking the question, are you having any problem with your vision? Because that gives people the ability to say no.
Yeah.
Now, maybe there's not a problem with their vision. I'm not trying to manufacture one, but I think it's just people will say no for reasons when they actually oftentimes do have an issue. They might not recognize it as an issue. Oh, itching, isn't that just something everybody goes through this time of year? Oh, burny eyes at the end of the day, I thought that was just my contacts. Flashes, I thought I'd have to go to somebody else for that. So a lot of times you won't hear that, or people just don't want to bother you, or they're afraid somebody's going to upsell them if they mention these sort of things. So I like just saying, tell me about any problems you're having with your vision, because I need them to stop for a second, pause, and really think about any problems. We need to get that on the table. Your superpower as a healthcare professional is solving problems. So we need to get that problem. Once we've got that, then we've got something to work with. And again, there may be times where they don't have anything. And then going beyond that to get them to uncover what it is that they really want, or what do they fear losing. These have been discovered as psychologists as 2 dominating motivators for people taking action. So to me, it only makes sense if we can put them in get them to a point where they're telling us in their own words what they want or what they want to avoid. Very powerful. And that's really pulled out in some ways out of the world of sales, that people who are good at selling, and I know that's a different topic, but at the same time, it's related, because a lot of people who are trying to sell something are trying to get someone else to take an action on something. We're usually trying to move them in that direction. So if we've got that, then we make a much better connection again with that part of their brain, that limbic system, that more feeling, emotion driven part of their brain, that's much more likely for them to say, okay, I'm with you. We got a connection here. I want to hear more. Let's move forward with this.
Yeah. Yeah. What you just mentioned as to how you ask that question to the patient, again, I feel like I agree. It's more open-ended questions. So we did learn in school, when you're taking case history, try to avoid those yes and no questions, because if you just keep getting no's, then it doesn't really let the exam go anywhere. And then the patient kind of feels like, well, I've said no, or I've just said yes, but I don't know how much more the doctor really wants to know.
Yeah.
So then when you kind of ask, like, how have your eyes been feeling? That's something that the patient can now take their time, think about it, and actually tell you how they've been feeling, rather than, have your eyes been bothering you? Yes, no. And then it's kind of done.
It's done. So, all right, and there's studies out there that's showing that doctors are really quick to interrupt patients. There's a few different ones, and there's, one, I think 15 seconds, another one was 12 seconds, where they actually studied doctors. Not only did they interrupt them, but actually prevented the patient from fully explaining their reason for coming in for the exam. So think about that. So doctors are real quick sometimes to make assumptions too early that we know what's wrong with the patient, or just not give them enough time to explain why they're there. And I think we do that a lot as optometrists. We get that baseline information that, I'm here for new glasses, I'm here for new contacts. And then we just move on. It stops there, but we don't explore anymore. So to the question, yes, I'm acutely aware of the importance of efficiency in an exam, and it's something that we need to be. It's just the world we live in with managed care, and there is from a business standpoint, certain number of patients you have to see, but I want it to be a great experience.
And, in Prescribing Change, you do reference other books throughout the book that also focus on making connections, being persuasive, and influencing change. So in your opinion, what would be the top 3 books, not your own, but top 3 books that you would recommend that discuss the importance of human connection and change?
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple that had a profound impact on me and really helped me better understand sort of this nerdy fascination with human psychology. I love the book Made to Stick. If you haven't read it, I think every doctor should read it, because it really gives you a lot of insight into how to make a more persuasive and influential presentation that sticks. Another one, which it is sort of a one of the earlier people to really study that aspect of the brain, the neurology side of things, and how we really act. Where do our decisions come from? And there's a book called Neuromarketing, which is more of really has more to do with sales. I think the book was targeted toward how to be more effective as a salesperson. And I don't think most doctors necessarily consider themselves salespeople, but we're nonetheless in the business of having to sell people on change. And there's a lot of similarities in how you approach that. So when the patient comes in, sits down, and if you want to get the patient to take your advice, take your recommendations, act on something, change how they prioritize their vision, that's non-sales selling. And we do it every day. And if we're going to be more impactful as doctors, we probably should get better at it.
Yeah. I also quickly wanted to ask, so do you have any other future books or projects that is coming up next now that Prescribing Change is out?
I said the same thing after this book that I said with the other ones. I'll never do that again. And so I can't say I won't. I will tell you this, that I am, that's the fourth one, and I have nothing on the burner right now. Part of that is because I really love this topic. I mean, this has turned into more than just another book. It's almost a mission for me to help doctors better understand what they need to change in the exam room to be more effective at getting patients to change. I think that's a topic that's often overlooked, and it's almost become a mission of mine. So I really want to move forward with that theme. So I've got ideas for courses and classes, and once the world opens up back up again, speaking and things like that on this topic. I just want to continue to educate and get the message out there. So that's why I appreciate platforms like this and the ability to come on here and talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
We're really happy to have you on here. And I think these kind of topics definitely need to be discussed more, just because there's not really any big resource for us to, even as new grads or veteran ODs, to kind of look at to see, like, how do we make these better connections with patients? And it's not things we really learn in school either. So
yeah, it's really not.
Yeah, your book was really helpful in that sense. And so, Dr. Vargo, our last question is actually specifically about you. So you are a perfect example of an optometrist that successfully transitioned from a clinical career to the business side of healthcare in practice management consulting. So what's your advice for ODs who want to pursue a similar career change in the future? And do you think having an MBA is necessary for that?
Yeah, I get asked about the MBA a lot, and I would say it depends what you want to do. I guess it served me well because when I did transition into consulting, they were specifically looking for that. I've had people ask me who are wanting to open up their own practice or they're in practice, should I get an MBA? And I would say it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money. And I would say no, unless you really want to do it. But I would say keep developing your business skills. But if you think you want to take a different career path, then maybe. I mean, you might want to look into that. Gosh, I can only tell you my experience, and I don't know what the right path is. Also, I would say if you want to consider taking a similar path or getting into industry or consulting, or you're interested in speaking, which a lot of ODs are, then go for it. But I would also tell you, be persistent, but also be patient, because I probably, from the point I decided that I might not want to spend the rest of my career doing clinical optometry, and I decided at that point to get the MBA, it was probably a 6-year process between that point to the point where I ended up getting the job with Prima. And I had done some things in between, but I did a lot of stuff for free. I wrote articles, I spoke, basically anything anyone wanted me to do. I drove hundreds of miles to speak at schools and didn't get paid. I remember the first time somebody paid me to write an article, I was like, you can get paid for this?
Yeah.
And then after that, the opportunities pick up, right? You start to get a little bit more like the things we talked about, credibility, and then you're getting paid to speak. And then, eventually you do start building a name for yourself. I don't think it necessarily would take everyone 6 years, but I would tell you that be persistent with it. Don't get frustrated in the beginning because you're going to get real excited because you write an article for a magazine and then it's just kind of comes and goes. Keep at it. And just be patient. And eventually people start paying attention to you. It's like I tell my kids, it's look, in sports, I tell them, look, just keep getting better and better and better. And eventually they have to pay attention to you. So that would be my advice if you wanted to take a kind of a lateral turn a little bit with your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, thank you so much, Dr. Vargo, for coming on. I think that book, Prescribing Change, it was really an eye-opener when I personally read it too. I think it has a lot of great points. And like what Deepan mentioned, the book is amazing because it also has real examples for people to really connect with what you're trying to sell to us, right? So we want to be able to learn all the information that you're trying to give to us. And so the examples are great. The connect method really makes sense. And the book flows very well from chapter 1 all the way down. So I highly recommend our listeners to buy Prescribing Change. Do you mind letting our listeners know where they can buy the book just before you go?
You can get it's on Amazon, so you could search it on Amazon, or you could go to, I do have a personal website that's Dr. Steve Vargo, SteveVargo.com, and you can get it on there as well.
Yeah, awesome. And then I'm assuming there they can also purchase your previous books as well.
Yes,
if they don't have any of those. Yeah,
previous as well.
But yeah, thank you so much again for coming on. We learned a lot from the book and we're so happy to have finally met you in person. We've seen you everywhere. So it's really nice for you to come on our podcast. Also to have another ICO alum on the podcast as well. So that's great too, always.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys do a great job with this. So I think the future of optometry is in good hands here. I did want to ask, I was watching one of your previous ones and it was a happy hour and there were drinks served. So I was just going to ask if I could get invited back to that one because that might be more fun than just talking business for
we should collectively invite everyone that we've interviewed and just have a really big Zoom happy hour Q&A.
Well, I'll be out there somewhere with a cocktail next time I see you, and
that might be a good idea.
Cheers to you.
No, you're always invited, Dr. Vargo.
You're
always invited
for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone for listening to 4 Eyes. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating to give us feedback on how we're doing. You can also check us out on Instagram at 4EyesOptom for more content. Look out for new episodes every Wednesday. So until then, stay tuned.